Hi, I'm Dalio. I founded Bridgewater Associates and have managed over $150 billion through multiple market cycles. After decades and correctly anticipating 2008, I've learned one thing. Right before a crisis, people don't feel fear. They feel smart. In this video, I'll show you the 3 financial mistakes that appear right before everything breaks.
Right before every major crisis, people feel unusually confident. Not nervous, not cautious, smart. Prices have gone up for years. Strategies have worked. Risk feels tamed. People start mistaking favorable conditions for skill. The longer the cycle lasts, the stronger this illusion becomes. I've seen this pattern repeat before every major collapse. The dot-com bubble, the 2008 crisis, the European debt crisis. The details change, but the psychology doesn't. Near the peak, uncertainty disappears from people's minds. Models stop stress testing extremes. Warnings are dismissed as outdated or pessimistic. This is the most dangerous moment in any cycle. Not when fear is high, but when it's absent. Confidence peaks precisely when margins of safety are thinnest. Leverage looks manageable. Volatility feels permanent. People stop asking what could go wrong and start asking how to maximize returns. That's when systems break. Not because the future is unpredictable, but because too many people have come to believe it is. In 1982, I was confident, logical, and certain. I had studied the data. I understood the mechanics. I believed my conclusions were inevitable. I was wrong. The market didn't collapse the way I expected. Instead, it moved against me, fast. Clients left. Cash evaporated. My reputation disappeared almost overnight. Intelligence didn't protect me. Being analytical didn't save me. That experience forced a painful realization. Markets don't punish stupidity. They punish fragility. You can have the right ideas and still be destroyed if your position can't withstand being early, being late, or being temporarily wrong. The market doesn't care how good your logic is, only whether you can survive long enough for it to matter. That lesson reshaped everything I did afterward. I stopped focusing on being right and started focusing on not being breakable. Smart people are especially vulnerable right before a crisis. Not because they're careless, but because they trust their understanding too much. When you can explain a system, model it, and justify every assumption, risk feels contained. Complexity creates a false sense of control. Strategies look elegant. Correlations look stable. Everything works until one variable behaves differently than expected. The problem isn't intelligence. It's overconfidence in it. Complex systems don't fail gradually. They fail suddenly, at the edges, where models stop working. And the smarter the strategy, the more fragile it often becomes under stress. This is where priorities quietly shift. Being right starts to matter more than staying alive. People defend positions instead of reducing exposure. They argue with markets instead of adapting to them. Pride replaces flexibility. Markets don't reward correctness in hindsight. They reward those who can absorb being wrong without breaking. The moment "I'm right" becomes more important than "I'm still solvent," the outcome is already decided. Leverage is almost never introduced in moments of fear. It appears in calm markets, when volatility is low and confidence is high. In those conditions, leverage feels invisible. Prices move slowly. Drawdowns look manageable. Borrowing seems efficient, even conservative. Past data confirms the story. Risk models say you're safe. The problem is that leverage doesn't announce when it becomes dangerous. It waits for volatility. When volatility returns, leverage stops amplifying returns and starts amplifying mistakes. Small price moves trigger margin calls. Margin calls force selling. Forced selling locks in losses at the worst possible moment. What could have been temporary becomes permanent. This is why leveraged losses are so destructive. They remove time. And once time is gone, recovery becomes impossible. People don't lose everything because they were reckless. They lose everything because leverage turned a normal downturn into a terminal event. Liquidity is always assumed, right up until it disappears. People believe they can exit any time because markets look liquid in calm conditions. Tight spreads, deep order books, constant bids. Paper wealth feels identical to real money as long as nothing stresses the system. But liquidity is not a constant. It's a crowd phenomenon. It exists only as long as not everyone needs it at the same time. When conditions change, exits shrink instantly. Buyers step back. Spreads widen. Prices gap. What you thought you owned at yesterday's price no longer exists today. This is the moment people discover the difference between paper wealth and usable money. Paper wealth assumes a willing buyer. Usable money doesn't. In a rush for the door, assets don't move in orderly lines. They pile up. And the last people to realize liquidity was conditional are the ones who pay the highest price for that misunderstanding. These mistakes don't appear randomly. They arrive together, fed by the same psychology. Long periods of stability create overconfidence. When nothing bad happens for a long time, people stop preparing for it. Risk models shrink. Safety margins erode. What once felt aggressive now feels normal. At the same time, envy quietly accelerates risk-taking. You're not just trying to do well, you're trying not to fall behind. Watching others succeed makes patience feel like incompetence. So exposure increases, leverage creeps in, and caution is framed as weakness. This is how success plants the seeds of failure. Past wins are projected into the future. Systems built for favorable conditions are pushed beyond their limits. People forget that luck played a role, until luck runs out. The tragedy is that nothing feels wrong while it's happening. The warning signs don't trigger fear, they trigger confidence. And by the time the psychology shifts, the structure is already too fragile to survive the shock. Early in a cycle, fear dominates behavior. Memories of pain are fresh. Risk is respected. People build buffers because they remember what happens without them. Late in the cycle, that memory fades. Success replaces caution. The environment feels permanent. What once required justification becomes automatic. This is when arrogance quietly replaces discipline. Not loud arrogance, but the belief that this time is different. Past success is especially blinding because it's recent and visible. Strategies that worked under one regime are assumed to work under the next. People confuse structural change with temporary noise. They don't recognize that the rules are shifting beneath them. Cycles don't announce when they change, they transition. Leverage builds, liquidity thins, correlations rise. And only after the break do people realize they were playing yesterday's game in today's market. Applied to today, the logic is familiar. Long expansions, heavy debt, compressed volatility, and widespread confidence in central bank control. These conditions don't cause crises by themselves. They create the conditions where small shocks have outsized effects. Right now, we're not in a normal environment. We're late in a long-term cycle, where the margin for error is thin and liquidity is tightening. Debt levels are high, refinancing costs are rising, and the system is far more sensitive to shocks than it appears. When rates rise late in the cycle, they don't just slow growth, they expose weak balance sheets that were built assuming cheap money would last forever. Add geopolitical stress, fractured supply chains, and competing economic blocs, and you get a world where stability is more fragile than headlines suggest. Systems that look solid under normal conditions can break under surprisingly small pressure. This is how cascades start. One missed payment, one forced sale, one policy shift. Because leverage and confidence are already elevated, the reaction is disproportionate. Late in the cycle, it doesn't take a big event to cause a big outcome. It only takes one that reveals how little room for error actually exists. What destroys people in a crisis is almost never the asset itself. It's the positioning around it. Good assets fail when they're owned in the wrong way. With leverage, with no liquidity, with no margin for error. Value doesn't protect you if you're forced to act before value can matter. Crises don't punish being wrong. They punish being forced. Forced to sell, forced to deleverage, forced to meet obligations at precisely the moment prices are lowest and buyers are gone. That's how temporary losses become permanent exits. The real killer is running out of time. If you have time, you can wait. If you can wait, you can recover. If you're out of time, the market decides for you. Most people don't lose because their thesis failed. They lose because their structure couldn't survive long enough for the thesis to play out. The most important principle is simple. Avoid ruin first. If you don't survive, nothing else matters. You don't need to win every year. You don't need to outperform at the top. You only need to avoid losses that take you out of the game. Because once you're out, there is no compounding, no recovery, no second chance. Chasing big wins feels exciting when others are celebrating. Playing defense feels boring, even foolish. But defense is what allows you to stay present when the environment changes. It's what gives you the ability to play offense later, when the odds are actually in your favor. The market doesn't ring a bell at the top. It rewards patience quietly and punishes fragility suddenly. Those who protect themselves while optimism is loud are the ones still standing when the noise disappears. Protection always looks unnecessary right before it becomes essential. The first step is reducing leverage, not just obvious borrowing, but hidden dependencies, variable rate debt, reliance on constant income, assumptions that refinancing will always be available. Anything that forces action under pressure is a liability in a late cycle. The second step is increasing liquidity and optionality. Cash isn't about fear, it's about control. It gives you the ability to wait, to adapt, and to act when conditions shift. Optionality is what separates participants from victims when systems reprice. The final step is stress testing your life, not just your portfolio. Ask what breaks if markets fall, credit tightens, or income pauses. Where do decisions become forced? Those pressure points matter more than projected returns. You don't prepare after the crowd realizes. You prepare while preparation still feels unnecessary. Crashes don't surprise markets. They surprise people. The signs are usually visible long before the break. Rising confidence, shrinking margins of safety, widespread belief that risk is understood. What surprises people isn't the event itself, but how fast conditions change once the illusion breaks. Feeling smart is often the final warning sign. It signals that caution has been replaced by certainty, that survival has been deprioritized in favor of being right. That's when structures become fragile, even if they look impressive on the surface. The real reason people lose everything isn't ignorance. It's overconfidence combined with exposure at the wrong point in the cycle. The principle that endures through every crisis is simple. Survive first, then capitalize. If you stay solvent, liquid, and flexible, opportunity will eventually find you.